The Coalition border station Epsilon's sensors registered the anomaly first, a wound in spacetime that shouldn't exist. Senior Monitor Vextel's crystalline appendages trembled as energy readings exceeded known theoretical limits. The void itself seemed to tear open, revealing swirling temporal energies that defied the laws of physics. "Impossible," the monitor whispered, all four eyes fixed on the expanding rift. These readings matched no known species signature. Through the crystalline viewport of the station, darkness parted like a curtain, and from its depths emerged a shape that sent shivers through every alien present. The TSS Nemesis materialized, its hull bearing scars that told stories of 1,000 battles. What was once sleek Terran engineering had evolved into something else entirely, a hybrid of technologies that should never have existed in the same time period. Commander Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Nemesis, his weathered face illuminated by holographic displays, showing tactical data in formats that would drive most beings mad. 30 years of temporal displacement had turned his once dark hair steel gray, but his eyes burned with the same intensity that had earned him command of Earth's finest battleship. Status report. Morrison's voice carried the weight of decades spent learning from civilizations that no longer existed. Lieutenant Sarah Hayes, her hands dancing across control surfaces that responded to thought as much as touch, responded without looking up. "Temporal fold complete, sir. We've emerged exactly where and when we planned." "And our guests?" Morrison asked, touching the modified neural interface at the base of his skull, a gift from the crystal mines of Proxima, extinct for 10,000 years. "The knowledge banks are stable," Chief Engineer Marcus Rodriguez reported from his station, where impossible mathematics scrolled across curved displays. "All 712 species archives remain intact." The Nemesis hung in space like a predator awakening from hibernation. Its hull, once standard Terran alloy, now rippled with technologies gathered across eons. Segments of the ship's armor bore the distinctive patterns of the quantum forge masters, while other sections gleamed with the living metal of the stellar architects. Each modification told the story of a civilization the Coalition had deemed too dangerous to exist. On Epsilon Station, Vextel's panic peaked as the station's quantum computers failed to identify a single weapon system on the approaching vessel. "By the Ancient Ones," the monitor gasped. "It's as if the ship isn't even there." Morrison allowed himself a grim smile as the first Coalition response ships arrived. They were exactly what the historical records had shown. Sleek, standardized vessels that represented the Coalition's belief in uniformity above all else. Their weapons powered up, following protocols that hadn't changed in 10,000 years. "They never learned," Morrison murmured, more to himself than his crew. "That's why they failed." The Coalition ships opened fire with enough energy to shatter a small moon. The Nemesis's shields, if they could even be called that, didn't flash or flare like normal defenses. Instead, the space around the ship seemed to forget that the attacks had ever happened. "Signal the others," Morrison commanded, and Hayes initiated the broadcast that would change the galaxy forever. Across Coalition space, in seemingly empty asteroid fields and abandoned planetary rings, ancient machines stirred to life. The seeds humanity had planted during their desperate last stand began to germinate, guided by the knowledge the Nemesis had gathered during its temporal exile. The Coalition ships launched a second volley, this time deploying their infamous planet killer weapons. Morrison watched calmly as the attacks approached, remembering the lessons learned from the ghost dancers of Sirius, who had taught him that the strongest defense was to simply not be where the enemy thought you were. "Now," he ordered, "show them what humanity has become." The Nemesis response wasn't a weapon in any conventional sense. Instead, it released a wave of pure information, the accumulated knowledge of every race the Coalition had tried to erase. Coalition sensors overloaded as they tried to process the impossible data, their standardized systems unable to cope with the diversity of thought and technology they encountered. Epsilon Station's communications array broadcast one final message before going dark. "The humans. They've brought them all back." the ones we destroyed. They remember. The legend of humanity's return would begin here, at this border station, with this simple truth. In trying to break humanity, the Coalition had instead created their own worst nightmare. A species that had learned to preserve and wield the very things they had spent millennia trying to destroy. High Admiral Zexval of the Coalition Analysis Division stared at the holographic reconstruction of the Nemesis' temporal journey, his scaled fingers trembling as they traced the ship's impossible path through time. Around him, the brightest minds from 17 subject species worked frantically to understand what they were seeing. "Play it again," he commanded, his throat sacs pulsing with stress. "Show me where they went after the Battle of Saul." The simulation flickered to life, showing the Nemesis taking a direct hit from the Coalition's primary fleet. But instead of disintegrating, the ship had done something unprecedented. It had fractured across multiple temporal planes, each piece seemingly destroyed yet somehow remaining whole. 30 years, lead analyst Mira Kavan whispered, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that indicated deep distress. They spent 30 years in places we cannot follow. The reconstruction showed the Nemesis' first temporal jump, which had hurled it back 50,000 years to the height of the Crystal Mine civilization. The Coalition had erased that species for developing consciousness transfer technology, but somehow Morrison and his crew had survived there for 3 years, learning secrets that should have remained buried. Commander Morrison's personal log, recovered from a damaged Coalition outpost, filled the chamber with his voice. Day 1247, since temporal displacement. The crystal mines don't see us as invaders, but as students. They know their future, our past, and still they choose to teach us. They say humanity has something their calculations cannot explain. Hope in the face of certainty. Admiral Zexval's scales paled as the simulation showed the Nemesis' next jump, to the era of the Quantum Forge Masters. They did more than study, he realized. They became living archives. The evidence was undeniable. Each temporal jump had taken the Nemesis to a different dying civilization. The ship's crew hadn't just learned their technologies. They had absorbed their cultures, their philosophies, their very ways of thinking. The vessel's hull now incorporated elements that spanned millions of years of development, each modification a testament to a species the Coalition had judged too dangerous to exist. "Sir," a junior analyst interrupted, their voice quavering. "We've decoded more of their transmissions. You need to see this." The central hologram shifted to show interior footage from the Nemesis. The ship's corridors seemed to phase between different architectural styles, one moment bearing the organic curves of the stellar architects, the next showing the crystalline precision of the void dancers. The crew moved through these spaces with practiced ease, their neural interfaces allowing them to perceive and interact with multiple temporal states simultaneously. They've mastered technologies that drove entire species mad, Mira Kavan observed. But how? The answer came from Dr. James Carter's research logs, recovered from the same outpost. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our intelligence or our technology. It's our ability to adapt. Where other species tried to master time, we learned to dance with it. Each temporal jump shows us new steps in this cosmic ballet. Admiral Zexval watched as the simulation showed the Nemesis visiting civilization after civilization. The Starweavers, masters of living ships. The quantum harmonists, who wrote symphonies with subatomic particles. The dream architects, whose cities existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Each was a species the Coalition had deemed too evolved, too dangerous, too different to be allowed to exist. They're not just a crew anymore, he realized, horror creeping into his voice. They're witnesses, guardians, living museums of everything we tried to erase. The final temporal jump brought the Nemesis to its emergence point near Epsilon Station. But the ship that emerged was no longer merely a vessel of war. It had become something unprecedented, a bridge between past and future, a testament to the civilizations that had chosen to teach rather than fight, to preserve rather than destroy. Send word to High Command. Admiral Zexfel ordered, his voice heavy with the weight of understanding. The humans haven't come back to fight us. They've come back to judge us. And they carry the wisdom of every species we've ever feared. As if in response to his words, new reports flooded in. The Nemesis wasn't alone. Across Coalition space, more temporal anomalies were forming. The ghosts of tomorrow were returning, and humanity had become their herald. The Coalition's supreme war strategist, Kvoth, watched in horror as red warning signals loomed across the galactic map like a virus spreading through a neural network. Each point represented another emergence of impossible ships, vessels that shouldn't exist, built by factories that had hidden in plain sight for decades. How did we not see this? Kvoth demanded, his chidness exoskeleton clicking in agitation. How did they hide an entire fleet in our own territory? Lieutenant Commander Sarah Hayes stood at her station aboard the Nemesis, monitoring the cascade of activations with satisfaction. Nanofactory Complex 7 through 23 now online, she reported to Morrison. Ghost fleet production at 30% and rising. The factories humanity had hidden were masterpieces of deception. Disguised as ordinary space debris, these microscopic assembly plants had drifted through asteroid fields and planetary rings, waiting for the signal. Now they were awakening, combining materials and technologies in ways that defied Coalition understanding. "Show me the first ship," Morrison ordered, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic display. The image materialized, a destroyer-class vessel emerging from an asteroid belt in the Carina sector. Its hull bore the organic curves of the Starweaver's designs, but its weapons were pure quantum forge master technology. The bridge structure showed the impossible geometries of the Dream architects, while its engine core pulsed with the living light of crystal-mined power sources. "They're learning from each other," Chief Engineer Rodriguez observed with pride. "The factories are combining technologies that never existed in the same era." Coalition response fleets arrived at each emergence point, only to find themselves facing vessels that seemed to have been built by ghosts. Ships with regenerating hulls, weapons that bent probability, and defense systems that operated in multiple dimensions simultaneously. From his command center, Kvoth received increasingly desperate reports. "The ships, they're singing to each other across quantum frequencies. Our weapons pass right through them, like they're not even in the same timeline. They're using tactics we've never seen. No, wait. These are ancient battle formations from the Void Dancers." Morrison activated the ship-wide communication system, his voice carrying to every corner of the Nemesis. "Begin Phase 2. Let's show them why you never corner a species that refuses to accept defeat." Hayes initiated the broadcast that would reach every awakening vessel. The message wasn't in any single language. It was a complex quantum transmission carrying the combined tactical knowledge of a dozen extinct civilizations. Each ghost ship received not just commands, but the accumulated wisdom of species that had faced extinction and found ways to fight back. "First wave achieving combat readiness," Hayes announced, her fingers dancing across control surfaces that shifted between states of matter. "The Dream Architect protocols are active." The Coalition's carefully ordered universe began to unravel. Their standardized battle formations meant nothing against ships that could exist in multiple tactical realities simultaneously. Their unified command structure became a weakness against vessels that could communicate through time itself. "Sir," Rodriguez called out, monitoring the quantum feeds. "The factory in the Horsehead Nebula just completed the first dreadnought. It's beautiful." The vessel that emerged from the nebula's dust clouds was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Nearly the size of a small moon, it represented the combined dreams of every civilization that had dared to reach for the stars before the Coalition decreed such ambitions too dangerous. Kvoth watched the tactical displays with growing despair as more ships emerged. "They're not just building a fleet," he realized. "They're rewriting the rules of what's possible." On the Nemesis's bridge, Morrison allowed himself a moment of reflection. "Send the final message," he ordered. Hayes nodded, transmitting the words that would echo through every coalition command channel. "You tried to break us. Instead, we learned how to rebuild. We carry the dreams of 1,000 dead worlds, and we will not be silenced." The Ghost Fleet moved with perfect coordination, each ship a testament to humanity's greatest weapon: the ability to learn, adapt, and combine the impossible. They were no longer just fighting for Earth. They were fighting for every species that had ever dared to be different, every civilization that had refused to bow to uniformity. The seeds of rebellion had grown into an unstoppable force, and the harvest was only beginning. Deep within the Nemesis's quantum-shifted halls, Dr. Emily Chen stood surrounded by ghosts. Not the spectral kind, but perfect holographic reconstructions of beings long extinct. A Starweaver elder gestured with graceful tendrils of light as she explained the mathematics of stellar engineering. Beside her, a crystal-mind philosopher debated ethics with a dream architect, their forms shifting between states of reality. "Begin recording," Emily spoke softly. Archive Session 2749. Cross-Species Cultural Integration Analysis. The Infinity Archive Chamber was humanity's greatest achievement, not a mere database, but a living memorial to everything the Coalition had tried to destroy. Walls pulsed with quantum crystals that stored not just information, but consciousness itself. Every corridor held memories, every chamber echoed with songs of dead stars and forgotten worlds. "Chief Archivist's Log," she continued. "Today, we begin the integration of the Void Dancer's harmonic philosophy with the Crystal Mind's understanding of temporal mathematics. The implications for both combat and cultural preservation are extraordinary." Commander Morrison entered the chamber, his neural interface synchronizing with the archive systems. The air around him shimmered as layers of historical data overlapped with present reality. "Status report, Doctor." "The archive is evolving faster than expected," Emily replied, gesturing to a display showing the merger of different technological philosophies. "It's not just storing information anymore. It's creating new connections, new possibilities." A holographic city materialized around them, the lost capital of the Quantum Forge Masters. Its impossible architecture flowed like liquid mathematics, each building a testament to their mastery of reality itself. Within its streets, reconstructed citizens went about their daily lives, their culture preserved in perfect detail. "Watch this," Emily said, her eyes bright with excitement. She made a subtle gesture, and the scene shifted. The Quantum Forge Masters city began to merge with a crystal mind sanctuary, their different approaches to physics and philosophy creating something entirely new. The archive isn't just remembering the past, it's imagining what could have been if these civilizations had met. Morrison watched as the merged city stabilized into a form that defied conventional physics, yet felt somehow right. "How many complete cultural records are we preserving now?" 712 species, Emily answered, her voice filled with pride and sadness. "Every language, every song, every dream the Coalition tried to erase. But it's more than just data. We're keeping their dreams alive." The chamber shifted again, revealing a vast virtual library where crew members sat with holographic teachers from a dozen extinct civilizations. Lieutenant Hayes studied temporal navigation with a Void Dancer master, while Chief Rodriguez learned the art of quantum engineering from a Forge master's reconstructed consciousness. "They're not just learning the technology," Emily explained. "They're understanding the philosophy behind it. The Void Dancers didn't just navigate space-time. They danced with it. The Crystal Minds didn't just build computers. They grew gardens of living mathematics." A warning light pulsed, indicating an incoming transmission. The holographic environment parted to show a tactical display. Coalition forces had discovered another of their hidden shipyards. Morrison's expression hardened as he watched the enemy fleet approach. "They still don't understand," he said quietly. "Show them." Emily nodded and initiated the archive's defense protocols. The knowledge they'd preserved sprang into action. Quantum algorithms from the Forge Masters merged with Void Dancer battle harmonics. The resulting defense strategy was unlike anything the Coalition had ever faced, a perfect synthesis of a dozen different approaches to warfare. The real power of the archive isn't the technology, Emily observed as they watched the Coalition fleet retreat in confusion. It's the proof that different ways of thinking make us stronger. Morrison touched a wall panel, causing the chamber to display images of every species they'd preserved. The Coalition thought they could create perfect order by destroying anything different. Instead, they created their own nemesis, a ship that carries the seeds of every dream they tried to kill. "And we're not done yet," Emily added, pulling up a star chart marked with hundreds of temporal anomalies. "There are more civilizations out there, more knowledge to preserve. The archive will keep growing, keep learning, keep creating new possibilities." The holographic displays swirled around them, showing endless combinations of art, science, and philosophy from across time and space. In trying to enforce uniformity, the Coalition had instead inspired the creation of something unprecedented, a living monument to the power of diversity and the strength found in preserving what others would destroy. The Coalition Cultural Reformation Center on Proxima II was their largest facility, a sprawling complex where conquered species were systematically stripped of their heritage. Its pristine white walls housed thousands of students undergoing mandatory integration into Coalition society. Tonight, those walls would fall. Ghost Fleet in position. Lieutenant Hayes reported from her station on the Nemesis, quantum shields at maximum dispersion. Commander Morrison stood at the tactical display, watching as his ships took formation around the facility. Each vessel had been chosen specifically for this mission, their designs incorporating elements from the very civilizations whose descendants they'd come to free. "Begin the broadcast," he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of countless lost worlds. The first sign that something was wrong came when the facility's speakers began playing music that had been banned for 10,000 years, the reality-shaping symphonies of the quantum harmonists. Guards dropped their weapons, overwhelmed by harmonies designed to awaken suppressed neural patterns. "Security systems are compromised," Chief Rodriguez announced, his fingers dancing across control surfaces. "The archive's infiltration protocols are working. We're in their networks." Inside the facility, thousands of beings looked up as their compliance implants failed. The Coalition's carefully constructed mental barriers began to crack as the Nemesis unleashed its most powerful weapon, memory itself. A young crystalline, forced to take humanoid form, watched in wonder as holographic images showed her people's true nature, beams of living light and geometric perfection. An elder Void Weaver, his tentacles bound in restrictive forms, felt the ancient songs of stellar winds stir in his consciousness. "They're remembering," Emily reported from the archive chamber, monitoring the cascade of awakening minds. "The genetic memory suppression is breaking down." Morrison nodded grimly. "Launch the memory seeds." Across the facility, quantum lock data crystals materialized, each containing fragments of the Infinity Archive. The crystals interfaced with any technology they touched, transforming Coalition propaganda networks into conduits for forbidden knowledge. A group of young Starborn, taught that their ancestors were savage nomads, watched in awe as images of their species' great void cities filled the air. The living ships that had once carried their people between stars, the songs that had guided them through quantum storms, all of it returned in a flood of restored memory. "Coalition response fleet detected," Hayes warned. "Multiple capital ships incoming." "Let them come," Morrison replied. "Show them what freedom looks like." The Ghost Fleet moved with perfect coordination, each ship commanded by crews who had learned warfare from the greatest strategists of 1,000 dead civilizations. But they weren't just fighting. They were broadcasting, transmitting, sharing the forbidden knowledge with every world in range. Inside the facility, centuries of Coalition conditioning began to unravel. A Forge Master descendant remembered how his ancestors had shaped reality itself. A dreamwalker child rediscovered her ability to perceive multiple dimensions. Each awakening sparked others, creating a chain reaction of remembrance. "Sir," Rodriguez called out, "the prisoners. They're not just remembering. They're teaching each other." Morrison watched through the facility's cameras as ancient enemies, forced together by coalition control, began sharing their rediscovered heritage. A crystal mind philosopher, her true crystalline form reasserting itself, helped a void dancer remember the steps of temporal manipulation. "Coalition forces will be in range in 5 minutes," Hayes reported. "They're too late," Morrison said softly. "You can't imprison a memory forever." The facility's central plaza had become a scene of beautiful chaos. Beings of all species were transforming, returning to their true forms as millennia of suppressed knowledge flooded back. The Coalition's uniform order shattered in the face of infinite diversity. "Final phase," Morrison commanded. "Show them the truth." The Nemesis's quantum arrays powered up, projecting scenes from the Infinity Archive across the entire sector. Every Coalition world, every suppressed species, every being who had ever wondered about their true heritage, all of them saw what had been stolen from them. As the Coalition fleet arrived, they found not just a prison break, but a renaissance. The beings they had tried to reform were reforming themselves, remembering who they were meant to be. The price of liberation wasn't measured in weapons fire or destroyed ships, but in the shattering of chains that had bound minds and souls. "Send the message," Morrison ordered as the facility's former prisoners boarded evacuation ships. "Let everyone know, the time of forgetting is over. The time of remembrance has begun." Grand Strategist Valcor of the Coalition Psychological Warfare Division stared at the latest battle footage, his primary hearts racing with unprecedented fear. The recording showed a Coalition dreadnought facing the Nemesis, but something was wrong with the image. The human vessels seemed to shift between different configurations, each one a nightmare pulled from Coalition history. "Play it again," he ordered, his scaled skin pale with stress. "Focus on the weapon signatures." The holographic display flickered to life. The Nemesis fired, but not with any conventional weapon. Instead, it launched what appeared to be pure information. Tactical data from battles fought 10,000 years ago, strategies used by civilizations the Coalition had erased. "Sir," Major Lexvi reported, her tentacles writhing in distress, "we've lost another battle group. The crews, they're refusing to fight." Valcor understood why. Each engagement with the human fleet forced Coalition forces to face the ghosts of their past victories. The Nemesis didn't just use the technology of extinct species, it wielded their tactics, their wisdom, their very essence as weapons. "Show me the crew interviews," he commanded. The screen split into multiple feeds, each showing a different Coalition veteran. Their testimonies were eerily similar. "The ship, it moved like the Starweavers. We thought we'd destroyed them all, but they're back. I saw crystal mind defense patterns, the same ones from the historical records. But they're different now, evolved, stronger. They're using our own history against us. Every strategy we deploy, they counter with something we erased." Commander Morrison stood on the Nemesis's bridge, watching the psychological warfare unfold through quantum-shifted displays. "Status report on Operation Mirror," he called out. Lieutenant Hayes responded, her fingers dancing across controls that phased between states of reality. Fear patterns spreading through their command structure. The Coalition's unified combat doctrine is breaking down. Their greatest weakness, Morrison observed, was always their belief that uniformity equals strength. Chief Rodriguez added from his station, "The Quantum Harmonists' Battle Symphony is ready, sir. It's been enhanced with crystal mind resonance patterns." The Nemesis' next attack wasn't designed to destroy. It was meant to reveal. As the Battle Symphony played across Coalition frequencies, each note carried memories of civilizations they had condemned. The music itself was a weapon, forcing them to remember every species they had judged too dangerous to exist. Valkor watched in horror as his elite forces began to crack. Veteran commanders froze in battle, their tactical displays showing them not just enemy ships, but the consequences of their civilization's choices. Each encounter with the human fleet became a history lesson written in fear and regret. "These humans," he whispered, "they've become living monuments to our sins." On the Nemesis, Emily's voice came through from the archive chamber. "Sir, the fear patterns are reaching critical mass. Their neural networks can't handle the cognitive dissonance." Morrison nodded grimly. "Show them the final truth." The Nemesis' quantum arrays powered up, projecting scenes from the Infinity Archive directly into Coalition command networks. They saw themselves through the eyes of the species they had destroyed, not as peacekeepers or guardians of order, but as destroyers of dreams, enders of possibilities. By the first light, Valkor gasped as the images flooded his consciousness. "We've become what we feared." The revelation spread through Coalition ranks like a virus. Every tactic the humans employed was a reflection of something the Coalition had tried to erase. Every strategy they used was learned from the very civilizations they had deemed too dangerous. They weren't just fighting a war. They were facing judgment from history itself. "Sir," Hayes reported to Morrison, "Coalition battle groups are beginning to stand down. Their command structure is fragmenting." Morrison watched as the mighty Coalition fleet began to break formation, their perfect order shattered by the weight of confronting their own history. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the most powerful weapon is simply holding up a mirror." The battle ended not with destruction, but with recognition. The Coalition forces retreated, leaving behind not just defeat, but the beginning of understanding. They had tried to create a perfect, uniform galaxy by destroying anything different. Instead, they had created their own nightmare, a species that had learned to preserve and wield the very things they had spent millennia trying to destroy. The quantum networks blazed with impossible data as the Infinity Archive opened its gates to the galaxy. Commander Morrison watched from the Nemesis's bridge as knowledge suppressed for millennia flowed through channels the Coalition couldn't block. Each transmission carried not just information, but the dreams of extinct civilizations. "Archive distribution at 70%, Lieutenant Hayes reported, her hands moving across controls that shifted between dimensions. "The Coalition's information barriers are failing sector by sector." Dr. Emily Chen's voice came through from the archive chamber, filled with excitement. "The knowledge integration is happening faster than we predicted. They're not just learning. They're creating something new. On 1,000 worlds, beings long suppressed began to remember and rebuild. A group of young crystalline descendants, taught for generations that their crystalline forms were primitive, watched in wonder as ancient genetic memories awakened. Their bodies transformed, becoming living matrices of light and thought. "Show me Nexus Point 7, Morrison commanded. The tactical display shifted to show a former Coalition cultural processing center. Instead of uniform order, the facility now hummed with diverse activity. Void dancers taught their recovered temporal arts to eager Starweaver students, while crystal mind philosophers debated quantum ethics with dream architect descendants. "They're combining technologies we never imagined could work together," Chief Rodriguez observed, monitoring the data flows. "The quantum harmonists' sound-shape theory is being merged with Starweaver navigation techniques." Morrison nodded, watching as centuries of enforced boundaries crumbled. The Coalition's greatest fear is becoming reality. Different species learning from each other, growing together. The revolution spread not through violence, but through understanding. Each liberated world became a beacon, broadcasting recovered knowledge to others still under Coalition control. The Ghost Fleet served not as conquerors, but as carriers of forgotten wisdom. "Sir," Hayes called out, "the Forge Master descendants on Proxima 9 have successfully reconstructed their ancestral quantum forges." The display showed massive structures of living metal and energy, rebuilt using knowledge from the archive. But these weren't mere copies of ancient technology. They incorporated advances from a dozen different species, creating something entirely new. Emily's voice crackled through again. The synthesis is accelerating. Every recovered memory, every restored technology becomes part of a greater whole. The archive isn't just preserving the past. It's seeding the future. On the edges of Coalition space, ships of impossible design began to emerge from restored shipyards. They combined the organic flow of Starweaver vessels with the dimensional mastery of Dream Architect engineering. Their crews weren't bound by species or tradition, but united by shared knowledge and purpose. Coalition response fleets are standing down, Hayes reported with a hint of triumph. Their crews are requesting access to the archive data. Morrison watched as former enemies became students of forgotten wisdom. Coalition officers, raised on stories of dangerous knowledge and forbidden technologies, began to understand the true power of diversity. Each sharing of information, each combining of different approaches, proved that strength came not from uniformity, but from variety. "Launch the final wave," he ordered. The Nemesis quantum arrays powered up, broadcasting not just data but possibility itself. The archive opened fully, sharing not just the knowledge of lost civilizations, but the potential futures they had dreamed of. Each transmission carried a simple message: the future belongs to those who dare to be different. Across the galaxy, beings of all species began to evolve beyond the Coalition's rigid categories. Crystal mind technology merged with void dancer philosophy, creating new forms of consciousness. Starweaver ships incorporated Dream Architect dimensional physics, giving birth to vessels that could dance between realities. "Sir," Emily reported, her voice filled with wonder, "we're detecting new pattern formations in the archive. The combined knowledge is creating theoretical frameworks that none of the original species had conceived." Morrison smiled, watching as the galaxy transformed. The Coalition had spent millennia trying to prevent exactly this: the free exchange of ideas, the combination of different approaches, the evolution of knowledge beyond control. Now they could only watch as their perfect order gave way to beautiful chaos. "Humanity's greatest weapon was never our technology," he said quietly. "It was our ability to learn, to change, to see beauty in difference. And now we've taught the galaxy to do the same." The Coalition High Council chamber, once a monument to uniformity and order, now rippled with the quantum energies of a dozen extinct civilizations. Commander Morrison stood before the assembled leaders, his form shifting slightly as reality itself adjusted to the presence of so much recovered knowledge. "You stand before us, not as conquerors," High Chancellor Vex Thor acknowledged, his scaled form catching the light of dimensional rifts that now adorned the ancient hall. "But as teachers. We come with an offer," Morrison replied, gesturing to the holographic displays surrounding them. "A future without fear of difference." Lieutenant Hayes and Dr. Emily Chen flanked him, their neural interfaces connecting directly to the Infinity Archive. Around them, the chamber filled with images of what the galaxy could become, had always had the potential to become. "Show them," Morrison commanded. The archive opened its gates fully, flooding the chamber with visions of possibility. The council watched in awe as they saw their own civilizations not as they were, but as they could be. Crystal mind technology merged seamlessly with void dancer philosophy. Starweaver ships danced through dimensions charted by Dream Architect mathematics. "This is what you feared," Emily explained, her voice gentle but firm. "The free exchange of ideas, the evolution of knowledge beyond control. But look at what that fear cost us all." The displays shifted, showing the graves of extinct species, the burning of libraries, the suppression of dreams. Then they changed again, revealing the new reality emerging across the galaxy, a reality where different approaches strengthened rather than threatened each other. "Your perfect order was a prison," Hayes added, directing their attention to live feeds from liberated worlds. "But we're not here to destroy it. We're here to help it evolve." High Chancellor Vex Thor rose, his ancient form seeming to shed centuries of rigid tradition. "How can we trust this power? This freedom?" Morrison smiled, activating his neural interface. The chamber transformed around them, becoming a living demonstration of the archive's potential. Council members found themselves experiencing memories from extinct species, feeling the joy of discovery and the pain of loss. Because the alternative is stagnation, Morrison answered. The death of possibility itself. From the Nemesis, Chief Rodriguez's voice came through. Sir, the Ghost Fleet reports all sectors ready. The network is complete. This was the moment, the culmination of humanity's long game. Not revenge, not destruction, but transformation. Morrison nodded, and Emily initiated the final protocol. Across the galaxy, quantum networks pulsed with new life. The Archive's knowledge began flowing freely, not just to select worlds, but to every being capable of receiving it. Ancient barriers between species dissolved as shared understanding grew. The choice is yours, Morrison told the Council. But the change has already begun. They watched as their carefully ordered galaxy transformed. Coalition worlds that had known only uniformity for millennia blossomed with diversity. Ships of impossible design soared between stars. Beings of all species began exploring potentials they had never imagined. We don't offer chaos, Emily explained, but a new kind of order. One built on understanding rather than fear. High Chancellor Vexthor stepped forward, his decision carrying the weight of history. We accept these terms, not as defeat, but as evolution. The chamber erupted in light as ancient security protocols were finally dropped. The Coalition's vast networks, once used to suppress knowledge, began integrating with the archive. Centuries of hidden information flowed freely at last. Signal the fleet, Morrison commanded. Begin the integration. The Ghost Fleet, scattered across the galaxy, transformed from a military force into a network of teaching vessels. Each ship became a seed of change, sharing not just technology but understanding. The dawn of the infinite begins now, Morrison announced, his voice carrying to every corner of known space. Not as conquerors or conquered, but as students of an endless universe. As the Coalition Council chamber filled with the light of new possibilities, humanity's greatest victory was complete. They had not just survived extinction, they had transformed it into rebirth. The galaxy's greatest fear had become its greatest hope, proving that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't weapons or order, but the simple courage to embrace change. The Terran Battleship that emerged from darkness had brought not destruction, but dawn. And in that light, all things were possible.